Long ago in English Nottinghamshire, among fields, hills, and oak forests, a boy named Robin was born. His origin is shrouded in mist, like a morning in Sherwood. Some said he was the son of a simple forester. Others claimed he came from a noble family and held a title. But one thing is certain. From childhood, he could distinguish truth from lies. Robin grew up among tall trees and quiet streams. He listened to the wind singing in the leaves and to the elders telling stories by the hearth. Nature and people taught him from a young age. Then the collection of heavy, excessive taxes began. One day, tax collectors came to their village. Robin was only 10 years old and hid behind the barn. Giles's father was arrested. The boy ran into the forest. Robin found him by the stream, gave him bread, and said, "If there is no home, we'll build one here." Thus the forest became their refuge. Years passed. Robin grew up, becoming a skilled marksman, fast, silent, and attentive to the needs of fugitives. Robin helped fugitives escape injustice, bandaged wounds, hid them, and shared everything, living between the world of the city and the forest. One day he stood up for an old man whom tax collectors were trying to beat. Robin threw stones, and one of the soldiers fell. Robin was recognized, and the next morning he was declared a criminal. Thus began his new life. He did not hide. Robin left with a bow and a few coins, walking along narrow paths with the grass-muffled footsteps heading to Sherwood. The forest finally accepted him. The boy born in injustice became a man who would one day challenge the order. Sherwood greeted him with silence. No threats, no questions. Only the wind in the branches and soft moss underfoot. Robin remained alone in the forest, without a home or a name, only with a bow and a sense of righteousness. He chose a remote place where boars root the earth, and a deer appears from the morning fog. He built a shelter from branches, bark, and old boards, slept on leaves, drank water from the stream. The first weeks were hard, cold, rain, and hunger. Sometimes he ate only berries, and sometimes he couldn't find anything. But he didn't complain. He listened to the forest and learned. The rustling of leaves warned of strangers. The birds warned of a person nearby. He learned to move without leaving traces, to shoot quickly and accurately, but only when necessary. The forest became for him not just a shelter, but a true ally. One early morning, Robin heard a child's cry. A boy about 9 years old, thin and frightened, in torn clothes, told about a family expelled for non-payment, a sick mother, and a missing father. Robin took the boy to the camp, gave him food, made a fire, and wrapped him in a cloak. In the morning, he escorted him to an old widow at the edge of the forest, who took the child in. Thus Robin began to help not only himself, but others as well. Over time, rumors spread. Someone whispered in the tavern, "Someone in Sherwood is saving fugitives." Someone said, "I found a sack of flour at the door, and on it lay a feather." People began to believe that in the forest lived not a robber, but a guardian of justice. The authorities thought differently. The sheriff began sending patrols and introduced rewards. 1 gold coin for the capture, alive or dead, of anyone who brings Robin Hood. No one brought Robin because no one had seen him, only heard legends. But sometimes he took risks, helping those in need in Sherwood. On a frosty evening, Robin learned that an old man named Alan was freezing in a house without a roof. He decided to help despite the danger. Robin sneaked into Lord Hastings' estate, stole warm blankets, a sack of coal and candles, and left them at the old man's door. Then he disappeared into the forest. Night after night in Sherwood, a new order was born, where goodness required no permission and honor needed no cloak. Robin was alone, but he did not feel lonely. In his life appeared those he protected, who were silent but remembered his good deeds. Soon, there would come one who would become not just saved, but a true friend. Sherwood Forest became a real home for Robin Hood. Robin knew every breath of moss beneath his feet, where wild mint grew, and where the forest dwellers greeted the new days in the mornings. The watering place of the roe deer, the rustle of trees at night. Some creaked, others were silent as if listening. he learned not just to survive, but became part of these woodland places. The forest was for him a fortress, a refuge, and a friend. But even in the deepest woods, one day the footsteps of another person sounded. It happened by the stream, on the border of two oak groves. Above the stream hung an old, narrow plank bridge, creaking underfoot, slightly crooked, as if alive. Robin walked lightly, with a bow over his shoulder, against the backdrop of warm but cloudy weather. From the opposite side came a tall man from Pollen. His head almost touched the branches, and on his shoulder lay a club as thick as a child's thigh. He walked simply but with dignity. Their eyes met simultaneously as they converged on the bridge, each from their own side. The plank creaked beneath them. "I don't want to go back," said the giant quietly but deeply. "And I don't want to go down," Robin smiled. "I suggest no arrows, only sticks." The man nodded and leaned on his club. Robin broke a branch from a tree, stripped the bark, making the stick lighter. They met on the bridge. The fight was brief but noisy. The sticks thudded against the wood and shoulders. Little John almost knocked Robin off, but he dodged and jumped back. Robin balanced on the board as if on a tightrope, confidently dodging blows, maintaining balance, and the fight continued with tension and agility. Robin struck John on the thigh, and he staggered. Both fell into the water, splashing and scaring a couple of ducks. At first there was silence, then loud laughter. "You hit skillfully," said the giant. "Call me Little John for a joke, and you, Robin," he replied. A free spot appeared by the campfire. Thus Robin gained his first comrade. Faithful, mighty, taciturn, but reliable as the roots of an old oak. Their friendship became strong and dependable. Some time passed. Late autumn came. Leaves fell like old letters and unspoken words, covering the ground with a yellow and red carpet. Robin was walking through a clearing when he heard someone singing in the distance. The song was quiet but clear, an ancient ballad about lost love and loyalty. On a stump sat a young man in a loose cloak. At his feet lay a lute, at his belt a dagger, dark hair, attentive but slightly bitter gaze. It was Will Scarlet. "Your song sounds like rain," said Robin. "Because it is about the truth," Scarlet replied without raising his head. "In our forest there is room for truth," said Robin. "And for those who can speak honestly," he added. They did not hug, but walked together, silent along the way. In this silence there was already understanding. Will turned out to be hot-tempered, passionate, but honest. Sometimes he argued, expressing his thoughts openly and directly. He sometimes rushed into battle first like a flame. He illuminated and warmed, but could also burn if approached without caution. In the Sherwood Brotherhood, he found his place. Robin met the third companion at the edge of the forest in an old stone abbey. It smelled of incense and fresh bread crust, creating an atmosphere of coziness and mystery. He came with news. A local monk was threatened for helping a runaway peasant. Robin just wanted to talk, but found something unusual in the empty hall by the window. By the window sat a round, rosy-cheeked monk drinking beer from a wooden mug. On the windowsill nearby sat a frog. The monk was arguing with it as if it could answer. "And tell me, who is the fool among us? Am I drinking alone, or are you silent?" said the monk. The frog was silent. Robin tapped the stone column and interrupted the argument. The monk turned and said, "No, you are just in time. We are debating whether the Lord made laws for everyone or only for those who pay taxes." Robin replied, "I think he would listen to you longer than to the sheriff." The monk smiled. "That's what I thought. I am Tuck, and if you are the Robin, know that I have a broom for the sheriff under my robe." So three became one, and one became many. They did not swear oaths or sign scrolls. They were united not by obligation, but by deep friendship and purpose. Each came with their own pain. Little John suffered from mockery and loneliness. Will lost everything, and Tuck was tired of seeing faith turned against people. Sherwood accepted them all. They ate bread, brewed herbal infusions, argued and laughed, shot at leaves from 30 paces. They became a brotherhood. People came to Robin's campfire, each with their own truth, but with a heart unwilling to accept injustice. The fire of their brotherhood burned brightly. Weeks passed. The forest became home, camp, and school. Robin, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Brother Tuck lived like family, sharing food and building shelters. They sewed clothes from scraps, brewed broths, built shelters from logs. The forest accepted them not as guests, but as its own, giving refuge and protection. But most important were the talks by the fire. Robin said, "We are not warriors or criminals. We are the answer to injustice. The fire in our hearts aimed to help." Many of them were wounded not in body, but in soul. They were betrayed, had their last taken, but a flame burned within them that Robin taught to use for good. Robin said, "We are not against wealth, but our fight is for justice, and to help those suffering from injustice and betrayal." He repeated, "We do not seek revenge. We return what was taken from them." Thus began the first raids on those who took bread from starving villages. The first raid was almost accidental. 5 riders were carrying tax from 10 villages. Silver was going to the castle, and the people were left without even bread. People baked bread from tree bark, slept on cold clay, children suffered from cold and hunger. Robin and John met the riders at dawn. "Passage is paid," said John. "We have orders," replied the rider. "Orders are not from those who are starving," said Robin, and the conversation quickly ended. 3 riders turned around and left. 2 dropped their weapons. The cart was handed over without a fight. The silver was distributed over 3 days to the most needy. Old people, a single mother with 7 children, and an old blacksmith who couldn't buy coal received bags of silver and a feather. Their signature. No one asked where the silver came from. Only at the doors were bags and a feather found as a sign, "We returned yours." The second incident happened at the mill. Miller Edward tried to protect the only sack of flour for the month, but the guards were rude and stronger. Robin disguised himself as a merchant with a basket of pies and a mug of honey. While the soldiers ate, Will Scarlet released the horses, hiding them in the forest. The carriage stayed with the guards, on foot and without the help of horses. The flour was taken to the village, and ash and a note were left at the mill. To be honest, the third story became almost a legend. The fisherman's wife, named Letty, came to the forest silently, holding a wooden spoon in her hands. Robin met her at the edge of the clearing. She said, "We have nothing. They even took the pot. If you give me a bowl, I'll cook soup for 3. The next day, the Sherwood Brotherhood borrowed 3 goats from the landowner, who kept the animals but did not feed them properly. They made a blanket from the wool, broth from the bones, and placed a cauldron at Let's door, copper, old, but with a handle. An inscription, "Pot of Freedom," was carved on the cauldron. Rumors about Letty and the Brotherhood quickly spread throughout the district. Children at the markets sang lines. "You are right if you share bread, but you have no strength if all the bread is yours alone." These lines were invented by Will. He sang them even during raids, sometimes mockingly, sometimes seriously, sometimes as consolation. The sheriff was angry not at the lines, but at the fact that they were sung. And you can't arrest songs. They are free like the wind. The Sherwood Brotherhood lived by rules. No letters, no judges, only an inner heartfelt law. The rules stated, do not touch the poor, even if he curses. Do not take revenge out of rage, only out of necessity. Give to the one who does not ask, meaning he is used to suffering in silence. Do not bring greed into the forest. It is like aphids, silently killing everything. You are not a judge. You are an assistant. Conscience judges, a person helps, Robin insisted. We are not building a state. We were a crack in its wall. As long as it's cold there, let warmth and light pass through us. We are a passage for warmth and hope. One day they saved a wandering fiddler. Soldiers beat him cruelly, but he managed to survive and stay with us. The fiddler played a ballad where the knight lost to the shepherd. Robin shot at a tree nearby. The arrow pierced close to the helmet. After that, the fiddler was released, and a month later he returned with an instrument and a performance for the whole camp. The melody was simple, but it carried peace and tranquility. It warmed the hearts of everyone around. One of the raids turned almost into a parable. A chest with expensive wine was kept in the castle. The sheriff saved it for guests. Robin and John sneaked into the castle at night, took out a barrel, but put in its place the same one filled with rainwater. In the morning, the sheriff drank the water and said, "The wine is somehow strange," while the real drink was distributed by the villages, a cup for each. They took no more than necessary, did not hoard, did not decorate the camp with gold. They had enough bread, warmth, and fire. They were not an army, a sect, or a rebellion. They were the answer. The answer to those who forgot what it means to share. The sheriff increasingly heard the name Robin Hood, but now it sounded not like a rumor, but as a challenge and a warning. He began to understand that arrows were not the main weapon. The main thing was trust and unity among people united by an idea. While the sheriff made plans and drew maps, a movement was growing around that was more than just a struggle. Robin and his brotherhood returned to the people what had been taken from them, not out of hatred and revenge, but with firm, kind determination and faith in justice. The resistance became a cause not for war, but for justice. Quiet as the forest, strong as an arrow, simple as bread, it inspired people to fight for the truth. Justice can take many forms. Sometimes it is like a sword, sometimes like a cry, and sometimes soft and quiet, like a voice that does not argue but simply speaks. In the voice of such justice, there is a truth that cannot be denied. It was in this way that Lady Marian appeared in Robin Hood's life, changing his path and fate. There were various rumors about her. Some said she was the niece of Lord Huntingdon, educated and raised at court. Another version was that she grew up in an abbey. Some whispered that she had lands but refused them, unwilling to partake in dealings and oppression, choosing a different path in life. The truth about her past remained a mystery, but everyone who saw Lady Marian remembered her eyes, calm and steady, like the surface of a lake before a storm. Their first meeting with Robin was not like the beginning of a ballad. There were no candles, balconies, or music, only fog and the trembling forest, through which a woman rode alone. Robin saw her from a tree where he sat in the branches, listening to the forest. This meeting was the beginning of a new story, full of silence, strength, and truth. The sounds of birds filled the forest until the horse's steps suddenly broke the natural rhythm. He jumped off the horse softly and silently, like a raindrop falling to the ground. He said, "The forest does not like loners," she replied calmly, "but I love the forest." Her eyes were calm, and her hands held the horse's reins tightly. He did not know who she was. She did not ask who he was. Together they walked over damp moss, under the shade of old oaks, where wild heather bloomed between the roots. They were silent for a long time, but the silence was not heavy. By the stream she stopped, bent down, and gathered a bunch of mint slowly, with a slight smile on her face. Then she said, "You are the one they sing about." Robin smirked. "Songs often lie," she replied, "but sometimes they remind us who we want to be." Thus their story began. Marian came rarely, with herbs for wounds, with a book that Tuck read aloud, or just to be near, asking for nothing. Her presence was always felt by the scent. Wildflowers and a bit of honey. She walked lightly, not breaking branches, as if the forest parted before her in advance. In the camp, no one asked who she was. Even John, usually distrustful of strangers, handed her a mug from the very first evening. Tuck gave up his place by the fire for her. Will played a melody without saying a word. Marian brought warmth not like the sun, but like a blanket on a cold night, warming everyone present. Robin did not ask who she was because her presence was the answer to all questions, coming like a gentle forest breeze that brings peace. Where she came from, who she lived with, why she came. He was simply nearby, and the silence between them became more important than any confessions. One day rumors spread. A crown collector had arrived in Nottingham. People locked themselves in their homes, and the sheriff gathered soldiers to guard the city. Robin wanted to act, but the city was closed and there was no access to it. He stood aside, pondering the next move. On the night before the gathering, Marian approached the fire with a bundle, a map, a list of names and a caravan scheme in her hands. "An ambush," she said. "The guards are hidden inside the wagon with grain." Robin was surprised. "How do you know?" she replied. "Because I listen." The whisper of truth is often quieter than the creak of a cart. Robin left, avoiding the trap, and 3 days later, a note without a signature appeared on the city gates. The note read, "Justice moves faster than gold is taken away." The sheriff tore it down and ordered the author to be caught. But the author had already brewed herbal tea in the forest, where sometimes in the evenings she stayed by the fire. Tuck poured her a warm infusion. John added firewood to the fire, Scarlet played the lute, and Robin sat nearby listening to her stories about the spring apple tree in the village. She told that the apple tree had blossomed, although it was previously considered dry. "Maybe it was just waiting," Marian said. "Sometimes blooming requires not rain, but silence." Marian always left quietly, without farewells, leaving Robin to watch her go. He watched until the last sound of her footsteps faded into the silence of the night, feeling the importance of every moment of their silent communication. Her footsteps left no trace in the moss. Only after that did he say, "Time to sleep." There were difficult days when the sheriff arrested the innkeeper on suspicion of harboring fugitives. Marian appeared in court herself. In a gray dress, she sat calmly, spoke in a steady voice without interruptions. Half an hour later, the innkeeper was released. "How do you manage it?" Will asked. "I don't argue. We were taught the same as their mothers," she replied. She did not fight, but changed the course of events. She did not carry weapons, but her word restrained anger. She did not live in the forest, but was part of it. A new strength appeared in Robin's life, not made of oak and steel, but of trust, light, and tenderness that demands nothing in return. He didn't know how to name this feeling, but in her presence he became purer and calmer, like water into which stones were no longer thrown. With her arrival, it became clear. The struggle is not only about arrows, but also the warmth that warms even in the hardest hours. The Sheriff of Nottingham did not tolerate mockery, and Robin Hood answered without words, with deeds. Their war lasted for years, not days. Every year the sheriff clenched his fist tighter, and Robin responded softer, more precisely and purely, like music playing in silence. Not by force, but by meaning. They were so different. One in chainmail on a throne of orders, with signatures, seals, and guards. The other in a simple cloak, with a bow and comrades. The sheriff built fear. Robin inspired trust. After another failure, the sheriff decided to act differently. Not to catch, but to lure out. He organized a city archery tournament in Nottingham. The prize: a golden arrow, a ceremonial speech, music, and treats for guests, but also a trap. The winner would receive gold, and then bars. Heralds spread the news throughout the district. But in Sherwood, they already knew about the trap. "It's a trap," said Brother Tuck, leafing through the Psalter. "Of course," nodded Robin. "That's why we're going." "Are you crazy?" grumbled John. "By meaning," corrected Robin. "If we don't go, we are afraid. And if we are afraid, we lose people." On the day of the tournament, the city buzzed like a hive. The square was filled with peasants, craftsmen, and nobility. Archers stood in rows, some in green, some in leather armor. In the center, a target. Nearby, the sheriff with a haughty smile and a list of arrests up his sleeve. To the side, a man in a gray cloak with an eye patch. He didn't say a word, just approached, drew the bowstring and shot. The arrow hit the bullseye. The second arrow split the first. Silence fell. Then a scream was heard. The sheriff jumped up and gave the signal. At the place of disappearance, they found a feather and a note. "The next arrow will be worth more than gold." Thus began a new chapter of the war, a war of traps and cunning. One day, the sheriff sent a cart with a sign, "Donations for the poor." Inside were soldiers disguised as beggars. Robin sent Scarlet to check the cart. He returned and said, "The horses don't snort. The wheels are new. The cart is old. It's a trap, not charity." Robin didn't go himself. At night, John came, opened the cart, and freed the bound beggars in armor with daggers. In the morning, stunned guards stood by the castle. The sign read, "We found your actors, returning them." The sheriff fell into despair, sometimes using cruel methods. One day the sheriff captured the miller with whom Robin shared grain. Under torture, the miller could betray everyone. Robin decided to act himself. Robin sneaked through an ancient tunnel to the prison kitchen. He put on a monk's robe and took a basket of bread, entering as if delivering lunch. The jailer nodded without looking closely. Half an hour later, Robin was already leading the miller to a stream, far from the guards under the cover of darkness. The miller whispered, "Why did you come alone?" Robin replied, "Because you are one of us." Robin said that the sheriff organized raids, set traps in the thicket, and bribed informers to catch him and his friends in the forest. One day, the sheriff sent a fake blind old man who hobbled along the edge of the forest, loudly calling for help to lure Robin into a trap. However, John stopped Robin, noticing that the old man's stick was new and he did not stumble. Everything seemed too clever and unnatural. They set up an ambush and led the fake old man into the forest, where the sheriff's squad was waiting, but they were already disarmed by their trick. True blindness is distrust of the heart. The squad was disarmed because Robin and his friends knew that strength lies in trust. One day the sheriff captured a girl, the innkeeper's daughter, to force Robin to surrender, but he did not wait and decided to act. Robin came to the town disguised as a minstrel, played 3 songs, and when the guards relaxed, he shot an arrow with a key into the keyhole. The door opened, the girl ran out, and they escaped on the backs of 2 ponies, disappearing in the sunset light. Since then, the inn always left a piece of bread and an arrow behind the stove, in case Robin came again, maintaining their secret connection. Their war was not for crowns or fortresses, but for the hearts of people, for trust and freedom that cannot be controlled by force. The sheriff thought power was a seal on paper, but Robin knew that true power is when a child reaches out their hand to you. The sheriff commanded with fear, Robin persuaded with trust. Although the sheriff seemed stronger, he was losing because power is not measured by papers. The sheriff made plans on parchment, while Robin forged paths in the moss of the forest, where power belonged to hearts, not paper. Every morning, when the sun rose over Sherwood, a new day began not of war, but of freedom. The trees whispered in the forest, arrows flew without oaths, bread was passed without names or expectations. Across the seas, a very different story was unfolding. Where the sun dries the land and hooves raise dust over ancient stones, a man was slowly returning from a campaign. He was called by many names: Lionheart, Lord of Battles, Defender of the Faith. But he called himself simply Richard. He returned not as a victor, but as a man who had traveled a hard road. His cloak was stained by the road, his sword had long ceased to shine in the sun, and his heart was full of doubts and less power. In Sherwood, his return was known without joyful celebrations. The fires burned quieter, without songs or laughter, not out of fear, but anticipation. Little John asked the evening fire, "Do you think he will spare us?" Robin replied, "He will test us not by words, but by deeds." Tuck shook his head. "If he forgives, let him forgive those who sat on 2 chairs. Curse no one until you stand before the judge." A few weeks later, Richard arrived in Nottingham. The city greeted Richard with flags, drums, and clean streets. People stood along the roads, full of hope or fear. The king walked silently. Tired but attentive eyes heard everything. Drums and silence in the alleys. He heard a name that was not spoken aloud, but whispered by children. There was no threat in this name, but a prayer. He came not as a symbol, but as a man. He stood before the throne, bowed deeply, but not slavishly, and said, "They call me a robber, but I did not steal. I did not tear crowns, I bound what others tore apart." He broke laws, robbed the treasury, and mocked royal power. He approached Robin and placed his hand on his shoulder. I did not return to punish. I returned to restore trust. He turned to the hall, addressing everyone present. If the people remember you with gratitude, it means you served this land honestly. He did not give Robin a title, a coat of arms, a castle, or lands. Instead, he gave more: freedom, forgiveness, the right to be oneself. On the same day, the Sherwood Brotherhood was amnestied. Little John returned to the village from which he once left in anger. They met him silently, but the next morning they brought firewood. The firewood was a sign that the door was open. Brother Tuck was reading prayers in the chapel again, now with the door open. The peasants came to him not for forgiveness, but for advice. He answered, "Eat first, then we'll talk." Will Scarlet stayed in the forest, but no longer as a fugitive. He taught the boys to shoot, and in the evenings played sunny ballads. Marian stood in the hall, not in the center, behind a column in a gray dress, holding a folded handkerchief. Her eyes were calm and clear. When everything was over, she nodded once without words. In that nod was much: understanding, approval, farewell, and invitation. Robin saw that nod and understood its meaning, felt support, and knew hope for the future. She smiled at him the way one smiles only for one special person, not in public. They left together, leaving the past behind. They settled in a cabin by the northern creek outside Sherwood. There, the trees grew thicker, and the sky seemed closer to the ground. The house was simple, with a sloping roof, a small garden, and a carved bench under the apple tree. Life was calm and free of unnecessary worries. They lived without titles, without missions, without struggle. He repaired bows and shot at leaves to keep his skill sharp. She brewed a potion from chamomile, cinnamon, and pine needles. In the mornings they gathered water, and in the evenings they sat by the hearth. Time no longer called or drove them. Sometimes old friends, or those they had once helped, would come, but they left quietly. They did not seek fame, but became a legend. After the king's return and the storm subsided, Robin Hood disappeared quietly and naturally. He did not hide or seek fame. There was no castle, no manor, no inscription on the door. Only the creek, old trees, and silence. They say he chose a place in the deepest corner of Sherwood, where human footsteps rarely tread, to stay forever. There, where the dew lingers longest and the birds sing especially softly, a man built a simple hut from old logs in the middle of the forest. In the hut stood one table, one bed, and several arrows. The bow hung on the wall, used less and less each day. Sometimes people came here with news, or just to sit silently nearby. He did not call anyone, but he did not drive guests away either. Marian was with him not as a guest, but as part of this peace. She gathered herbs, read books, and sometimes sang. When her voice sounded in the twilight, the forest seemed to freeze, listening to her gentle song that filled the space with silence and light. They did not marry. There were no weddings, rings, or witnesses. There was only the fire, trust, and the feeling that everything was in its place. Rumors circulated in the village. Sometimes Robin was alive, sometimes Robin was dead, but no one knew for sure. What mattered was that he existed. Boys played at being outlaws, choosing the role of Robin, while girls whispered songs about Lady Marian. The elders raised their mugs, saying, "There was a time, and there was a man, and time went on," remembering a bygone era. When he felt his strength fading, Robin called Brother Tuck not aloud, but by wind, letter, sign. Brother Tuck came silently, sat nearby, and remained a silent companion in Robin's final days. Robin did not leave on the battlefield or in a dungeon. He simply closed his eyes, departing the world peacefully and with dignity. In his cabin, under the gentle singing of birds and the rustling of the forest, he realized that that day there was no wind. No cones fell, not even the grass rustled. Everything stood still, as if time itself decided to stop to say goodbye to him. The place of his rest remained unknown and unimportant. He remained not in the earth, but in the people. Every time someone helps another selflessly, it is Robin acting through them. Every time someone stands up to protect the weak, it is Robin standing beside them, invisible but strong. Every time someone says, "We must not stay silent," he lives in those words, in actions, in the memory of each person. If at night you hear a light rustle of leaves, if it seems that someone is walking along the path, do not be afraid. It is just a legend. It is just Robin. He simply moves on, forever alive in every good deed, in all hearts, in the memory